I now recognize Mr. Clyburn, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for remarks on the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Chairman Womack, referring to each other as my good friend is a phrase we often use in this body, often not seriously. But through common human connections, shared values, and love of country, when I refer to you, Chairman Womack, as my good friend, I really do mean it, and I thank you for your enlightened leadership and stewardship of this subcommittee. I'd also like to thank Chairman Cole, Ranking Member Delaro, as well as our staffs that you have listed, Mr. Chairman, headed by Christina Monroe on my side and Doug Disraw, Disroot, I believe, on your side. And much of this is why I regret that I am unable to support this bill. Mr. Chairman, throughout this country, the American people are concerned about the cost of living and the economy. In fact, more than 771,000 people are experiencing homelessness, and 75% of low-income renters spend more than half of their income on rent. In my home state of South Carolina, nearly 57,000 low-income households, seniors, people with disabilities, working families, count on HUD's rental assistance programs to help make ends meet. And nearly every district is faced with a housing crisis. I hope that we can agree that housing is a basic human need. Yet, the bill before us proposes to shortchange HUD's rental assistance program by more than $5 billion and eliminate all investments for eviction prevention. This would mean hundreds of thousands of HUD-assisted households would face eviction, the majority of whom are elderly, disabled, or families with children. Given the dire need to lower the cost of living for Americans, this is unacceptable. Despite a housing shortage of more than 7 million units, this bill cuts housing construction and preservation programs by 46%, nearly half. This bill also gives HUD broad authority to increase rent costs while cutting programs that help put residents on a path to self-sufficiency and wealth building by 31%. This bill ends grants to 10 HUD-certified housing counseling agencies in South Carolina, who each year educate and lead hundreds of homeowners to successful homeownership. Unfortunately, this bill makes it harder for our constituents to find places to live. The bill before us has largely adopted the president's proposal to further gut fair housing enforcement by cutting fair housing activities by 67%. As many of you know, before I came to this body, I served for over 13 years on 2 predecessor bank boards that are now known today as Bank of America. I served on the Audit Committee, and I chaired the Community Reinvestment Act Committee. And I can tell you that we at that bank admitted to the atrocities that we visited upon many people by redlining their communities and denying them fair housing. And we have been working in this body to overcome that. But this bill takes us back to where we were back in that period of time. Today, people with disabilities account for 53% of individuals filing discrimination complaints at a time when less than 5% of America's housing is accessible. And over 60 million Americans have a disability, including a disproportionate share of veterans, seniors, Black Americans, and tribal communities. But, Mr. Chairman, the harmful cuts in this bill extend far beyond housing. This bill also zeroes out investments for Amtrak, leaving little or no room for making the necessary infrastructure upgrades for passenger rail, guts public transit, and bus projects, ignores the costly realities of climate change, and takes $4.4 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law to make up for a woefully inadequate allocation. These transportation cuts are particularly short-sighted because they compound the housing and the cost of living crisis. Access to safe, reliable, affordable transit is essential for connecting people to jobs, schools, and healthcare, the very things that help families achieve stability and self-sufficiency. Now, let's be honest about what's really happening here. Just weeks ago, Republicans passed their big, ugly bill, which will increase the deficit by trillions of dollars over the next decade through tax cuts for billionaires and big businesses. At the same time, in this appropriation process, Republicans claim we must responsibly cut federal spending because of deficit concerns. But their definition of responsible is taking housing away from vulnerable Americans and kicking the can down the road on addressing this country's growing housing shortage, homelessness crisis, and crumbling infrastructure problems that will only get bigger and more expensive if we do nothing to address them now. The funding tactics of robbing Peter to pay Paul have real-life consequences. If the job of members of this subcommittee to improve the day-to-day lives of Americans, it is our job. Unfortunately, this bill is full of unrealistic gimmicks and will be devastating to many communities throughout the country, especially in my home state of South Carolina. Mr. Chairman, I understand the challenges you face, but I respectfully cannot support a bill that fails to make honest investments to improve daily commutes, modernize our rail systems, and address the public housing backlogs that have plagued our nation for decades. So I plead with my Republican colleagues and friends, let's work together to develop the means and muster the courage to do that which is necessary to make America's greatness accessible and affordable for all. Unfortunately, this bill, as written, fails to meet that goal. I urge a no vote and yield back the balance of my time.